Hi everyone, thank you for joining me here at Ubuntu Quoted Podcast. This is episode 2, and we'll just go straight into the topic: confidence. Confidence is fragile. I did introduce this title in episode 1 when I did the introduction about us, about me. My name is Fortune Maone. I am the founder of Ubuntu Courtyard, and welcome to our second episode today. We've only just starting this podcasting journey, so it means a lot that you're listening and that you're here with me. So I had written an elaborate explanation about things, and maybe introduction, 30 seconds to about, something along those lines, according to what the guidelines were saying. I did some research and everything. And then I did show the introduction to my son, who happens to listen to quite a lot of podcasts. He had a read, and he said, the first thing that he said was, you like the word thought-provoking a lot, don't you? And I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say in that regard. So I kept quiet. And then I knew exactly probably what I had to do. So I just said, okay, so should I delete thought-provoking? And he said, you could. And my son, being born and bred in Britain, is basically British. The fact that he said you could meant do it, So that's exactly what I did. So I deleted that, and then I left insightful, inspirational, something along those lines. But he still wasn't convinced. And then he said, you know what, Mom, what you need to do is to just pretend that you're talking to me. You don't have to complicate things, just go for it. So as I settle in this talk, I hope you can bear with me if I'm not doing things the way others, probably professional people who've been in the game, do things. But he did encourage me and say that a lot of people who've been doing it for quite a while, they just go straight to the point. So I did try to do that, but as you can tell, I'm already into storytelling mode because that's what I do. And I also did wonder, at what point do you talk about like, share, that sort of thing? And I'd also written something, and let me read it out to you. I'd written this. Thank you for joining us today. Creating this well-researched and timeless podcast requires effort, time, and dedication. However, we love doing it because we care about our listeners and value the time you spend with us. All we ask in return is for a like, a helpful comment, a subscription, or sharing our content. Your support helps us share many beautiful and impactful stories that deserve to be told. We hope you can help us grow and enable others to discover our content so that we can all thrive together, which is what the essence of the podcast is all about. I've covered all of these things in episode 1. It's only about 4 minutes, 41 seconds. So it's not that long. So I did that as part of our introduction. But my son said, no, remove that bit. So this is the last time that you hear me asking anyone to do all these things, because he said if people want to, they will. So I'm just hoping that as we kickstart this podcasting journey together, you will do what you know you gotta do. And yeah, by the way, I've been told that I giggle a lot. Well, by one or two people. So I love, and once in a while. So I hope that's okay with you too. So thank you. I just want to thank my kids, my daughter, my son, for their encouragement, for always believing in me. There's not even one time that I felt like I could, be an embarrassment in any way, shape, or form, and they've encouraged me to be myself, really, both of them. And my friends, got quite a few friends who've encouraged me. There was a time well, for the longest time, we've been focusing on our own internal podcasts. By that, I mean messages via WhatsApp. So it's not unusual for us to get to 30 minutes and it disconnects, and then you start all over again. You press send, it goes, and then you start on part two. So we've done that, with two friends at least. So that has given me enough practice to just share my thoughts. And so I'd like to say thank you to my friends and all the other friends who've been a part of my journey. So it's amazing that we're talking about confidence, because the reason why I'm doing this episode, it's one of the first episodes really, is because it's been an issue that's been close to my heart for the longest time. It has affected me from when I was a little child to only right now, actually. And so I started my blogging journey in 2018 because I've always loved writing and expressing myself. And I used to do that a lot via Facebook. So I'd write these really long posts, amazingly long posts, which is what a lot of people don't do. But because I always love writing and I like expressing myself from time to time, it allowed me to just express whatever it is that I had on my mind, whether it's helpful, whether it's encouraging, inspirational, that sort of thing. And then my friends encouraged me to start, like a blogging platform, which I did in 2017, 2018, and it transformed into a book publishing business. So that was more than 5-6 years ago, and by now I think I should be somewhere. But I did lose confidence at some point in everything that I was doing. And for the longest time, I did hide behind the keyboard, just writing stuff, because I couldn't bring myself to actually speaking in front of people or the way I'm talking to you right now. So this confidence, or rather self-confidence journey, it's something that's very close to my heart. And I hope that as we discuss this, you also find insightful information, encouraging information, that sort of thing. So for the longest time, I've been writing on Facebook, and usually those posts would go with 0 likes and that kind of thing. And I kept writing because I loved it. And it wasn't easy. I've deleted most of the stuff. So there's only, just a tiny bit of stuff left on Facebook. So I've actually had to overcome a lot of stuff just to be here. And most of it has been what I've been telling myself. So we'll touch on the power of those internal voices later on. So the title is Confidence is Fragile. How did we come up with this title? This is actually based on a true story. Around 2014, I had a conversation with my daughter's former teacher. At the time, my daughter was going to high school. She'd just finished primary school. So the primary school was a girls-only school. It was a prep school, very small. And we'd taken our daughter to that school, having noticed that there was something lacking, in her previous school. When she started reception in her old school, the first school that she went to soon after nursery, the reception teacher was amazing. She realized that daughter had talents and she was different. And so she actually pushed daughter, beyond what others were being asked to do. She'd be given extra homework, those kind of things. And daughter never complained. She was happy. She could, she was coping very well with everything. And then she moved on to the second grade. it's a second grade year reception, then year one. Yeah, she moved on to year one, and things changed. We noticed a difference. Where daughter used to thrive, she was now regressing, basically. And we noticed a difference. As parents, we noticed and we've always appreciated the power of a good education. We grew up in Africa, born and bred in Africa, and we knew that the kind of education that one person or one was exposed to growing up usually had an effect on who they become. For example, if someone went to schools where resources were low, then however brilliant they were, those children became mediocre, even though they could have done better. And we saw that there were some schools where, really brilliant schools, where children were always, those schools were more than capable of bringing out the best in each and every child. We knew that. And those children, some of them might not have been academically gifted, but they'd still thrive somehow in certain areas. The way they look at life, analyze things, the way you talk to them, the way they view the world is always different to children who didn't have this, the kind of exposure that others, others had. But parents, to this day, they still try their best to send their children to the best school they can, and they still pay loads of money. So we valued education. In the UK, state schools, so many brilliant state schools, and I'm so grateful. I've worked in the education system for a while, and I understand quite a bit about how the education system in the UK is actually so much better than many countries out there. Although, there are issues here and there in certain places, but on the whole, many teachers, they do a brilliant job, and they're really committed to doing what they were, trained or created to do. Of course, there are exceptional cases, and but we're not focusing on that. So we took our daughter at the time, into the private school education. We didn't have that much money. It's not because we're rich, which is a wrong belief that some people tend to have, that if somebody went to a private school, it means that the parents are well off, they trust fund babies, or that's not that there's anything wrong with that. But in our situation, we were just, scraping by to allow our daughter to have the best education possible. So what we realized is that the teachers were usually focusing on the troublemakers in her old school. And because daughter ticked all the boxes, most of the boxes, she was a good girl, she was a good child, she didn't cause any, issues or anything like that. Sometimes she'd be left to her own devices, and that's how she started regressing. So we'll touch on self-confidence and environmental issues and how they can make or break you. But before that, so when she went to this school, she was thriving. Just like what they were doing with all the other children, they were bringing out the best version of who she is, including finding the hidden talents that we never knew that daughter, had. For example, she was so good at art. She was good at, the usual subjects, maths, English. She was very good at drama. She was good at, she could play the violin up to grade 2. She took exams and she could play the violin quite well. She was quite sporty. We didn't know that, but she was actually. She'd play tennis, hockey, netball, she'd go swimming, all those things, and she'd do really well, join a few clubs, and it was just an amazing place to be. Of course, this school is no longer in existence, and just like a few other private schools, they couldn't sustain themselves. The numbers were low, and they ended up shutting down not long after we left. But it created wonderful memories for us, and I'm forever grateful for that experience. Those experience for my children's education system from the time when they were really young to where they are right now. I'll always be forever grateful because at each and every stage we have experienced the amazingness of the British education system, including state schools, including a stint at another, Christian school. So much to be thankful for. But the teacher said to me, she told me that now that daughter was going to a bigger school, she was hoping that she'd be able to maintain her old friendships who were also going to the same school as daughter. And she went on to say that, she was so proud of her. She had done very well, and she wished her the best, really, but she needed to be in touch with good friends, a few good people around her, because confidence is fragile. She didn't say confidence is fragile as such. She said confidence is a fragile thing. So if something is fragile, what does it mean? It means it's something that can be destroyed. So you can have confidence 1 minute and lose it, isn't it? You can build up your confidence if you didn't have it. So it changes. Sometimes people feel confident or not so confident. It happens. So this is why I feel that it would be a good thing to just, as we grow together, especially with this podcast business, we share these stories to help each other, because confidence is a big issue. I did see children suffer with lack of confidence, even when they were more than able. Lack of confidence was such a limiting factor in so many aspects. I've seen adults struggle with confidence. Even when you look at someone and you think, you've got everything, why are you struggling in this area and that area? They don't have the confidence. I too, as a mother, I've lost confidence at some point, but when you get it back, it's something that's amazing. And when you're living and when you're leading your life in that self-confident manner, it changes things in your life for the better. So I did notice that self-confidence, or confidence rather, and self-esteem are two different things. So self-confidence, according to the University of Florida, is South Florida definition, they say self-confidence is an attitude about your skills and abilities. It means you accept and trust yourself and have a sense of control in your life. You know your strengths and weaknesses well, and you have a positive view of yourself. You set realistic expectations and goals, communicate assertively, and you can handle criticism. So that's what self-confidence is all about. When I look at confidence, I have also realized that, it's self-confidence is about believing in yourself to get things done. You're less likely to hold back or conform to other people's perceptions of who you are, who you should be. You're more likely to follow your dreams if you have confidence. You're more likely to show up, speak up, communicate your wants, your desires, even in relationships, because you have the confidence, you know who you are. And confident children, they show up in different ways. I've worked with children long enough, to see that some children, they're not as confident as they should be. And unfortunately, when they hold themselves back and when they go into this world with that timid nature and, facing down, that kind of thing, that attracts a lot of issues in their lives. Unfortunately, it's just like bullies, for example. They prey on people and children who aren't as confident as they should be. So self-confidence is also a defense mechanism. So if someone is not sure of themselves and that sort of thing, they're less likely to be preyed on. Is it preyed on or preyed upon by all sorts of people with all sorts of motives to harm others. So self-confidence is a protection mechanism, the way I say it. Self-confidence and faith go hand in hand. And for the purposes of this talk, of this podcast, I'll share one verse. This is 2 Timothy verse 1 to 7. It says, "For the Spirit of God gave us, does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." I looked into faith. Of late, for the past few months, I've been learning about faith and the power of having faith. And I've been learning so many things, which we're not going to touch on in this podcast because it's such a big topic. And it's a topic that I also believe has been affecting or is still plaguing quite a lot of people. Their lack of faith, their lack of knowledge, that sort of thing, even when they go to church all the time. What I now know about faith is that it's a word that's is derived from a Hebrew word, emuna, or emuna, yeah, emuna, I think, which translates to take firm action. And that word stems from amun. Is it amun or amun? Sorry if I'm not pronouncing the right way. Amun, that's the Hebrew word, which means to trust. To trust that something is true. So just like confidence, there is a trust element. Faith is about believing and taking action. It's not just about believing something, because believing alone is not enough. When you believe and you take action according to your beliefs, even you can't see those things, you acting and doing things according to biblical laws and principles, that's faith in action. So faith is about believing and taking action. So just like when you see a self-confident person, they know who they are and they walk and operate according to what they believe. So this is why we see so many self-confident people do amazing things in life. Before I proceed, I just wanted to highlight that in this day and age, there are so many people who present this ego ways of doing things. And some people might actually look at certain people, the way they carry themselves, they talk the talk, they dress a certain way, they present, they talk. And if you hear them speak, you'll think, oh my gosh, what an amazing and incredible person. But ego is not self-confidence. Usually ego is used as a mask to hide feelings of, you know, inadequacy, or it's used as something that fills up an empty void. So ego and self-confidence are two completely different things. And then there's self-esteem. Remember I said self-confidence and self-esteem are completely different things, although people tend to use those phrases interchangeably. So self-esteem is how we value and perceive ourselves. It's based on our opinions and beliefs about ourselves. And these opinions, whatever it is we believe about who we are, it can actually be difficult to change. It's something that can take years. So one person can actually be confident, self-confident. Why does this happen? Because self-confidence can be built up. Remember how we said self-confidence is fragile. So it's something that you can build. You can build your body. You can be a bodybuilder. You can be quite good at doing something, whether it in sports or anything at work. That's self-confidence. And you can build it up incrementally, bit by bit, until you become an expert. But it's not uncommon for many people to have self-confidence and lack or have a low self-esteem. I haven't studied psychology. I've done a bit of reading on psychology, and I have a bit of an understanding of how things work. So if I'm not defining these things the right way, please let me know and help others as well make sense of what we're trying to discuss right now, because it's something that affects each and every one of us. So self-esteem, it's something that probably a lot of us, the majority of us, they have to work on. And it's something that can be ingrained. Your low self-esteem, for example, can be ingrained from a very young age. And I'm just trying to make sense of these differences between confidence and self-esteem, that you can show up and with these abilities that also produce amazing results in our lives. But if your self-esteem is low, then it can have a negative impact on how you carry yourself. Because ultimately, self-esteem, if it's something that makes you look at yourself in a certain way despite your achievements as a result of having confidence, it can rob you of joy in life. You can be amazing in so many areas. You can have so much money. You can be gifted. You can be talented, and you can show up and be everyone else and be celebrated. But you yourself as a person, you don't feel it there because there's a void in there. And I think this is why we see some celebrities, for example, have the money and all these amazing lifestyles that a lot of people would like to have access to. But these people, not just celebrities, even so many people who don't even have money, that much money, they can succumb to self-destructive tendencies sometimes because they don't think or they don't value themselves highly. Why? Usually it's because of something that would have happened in their lives, maybe when they were younger, or at some point in their careers, or growing up and that sort of thing. As it happens, I've read this book, well, two books actually, by Oliver James. It's actually Dr. Oliver James. I don't have the books with me right now, but I think he studied psychiatry or is a psychologist. He is a doctor. And I first came across the book many years ago, but then my son was probably a toddler, a baby really. And I heard this doctor speak about his book on the telly. I'll never forget that day. I just come back home from a school run, dropped off my daughter at school, and I had my son with me getting ready to do what I had to do. And I switched on the TV for a bit, and I saw this doctor talk about his book and how it can affect how the way parents raise their children can affect who the children become later on in life. So the emphasis was on childcare. It was on the nursery aspect. I think he did cover that as well. He did cover parents and caregivers. And in the book, he gives examples of certain celebrities, for example, including politicians. And he touches on their growing up, well-being and things like that. I mean, who they were growing up, what happened. And he tries to put everything together to make sense. And certain people behave a certain way, mainly because of the way they were raised. For example, if a parent wasn't present emotionally, for example, that child would then develop some coping mechanism from being a baby. Maybe a baby cries and they're always ignored. They don't have anyone to play with in certain situations. Those children tend to become avoiders, for example. So there's so many definitions of the kind of people that people become. And if you really want to understand certain things, probably especially the people who have hurt you in life, and if you're on a healing journey of some sort of, or if you seek healing, it usually involves forgiving and let go. But I think it's easier to forgive people or to give them grace, including the people who did the most horrible things to you, if you understand where they're coming from. So if you ever come across people who tell you certain life stories about themselves, growing up, for example, that the parent passed away when they were young, and then married someone else, the father married someone else, and then life was tough for them, that sort of thing, and then you realize that they actually very difficult people to deal with. Have you met people like that? I have, people who somehow have a story of I'm not saying everyone is like that, because ultimately people go through all sorts in life, and it's up to us how we choose to use whatever it is that we've gone through for good or bad. So there's still so many people who went through the most difficult challenges in life, and they told themselves that it stops with me. So I'm not going to let another person suffer. I'm not going to let my children go through what I went through. There's so many people like that. And then there are people who will always give excuses. Just because so and so did this and that, I was in care, I never had anyone to love me, that kind of thing, and they go on to create chaos. We're not judging anyone, because self-esteem, the way you see yourself or how you perceive yourself, is actually a very difficult thing to do. And I think that's where faith is very important, that sometimes you might not understand how things are going to get better, how they'll work. You just have to have that faith and believe that it's going to be okay. So when you have faith, it means you're relying on a higher power, not just your own understanding, not just your own strength. And this helps you deal with certain things, not just by your own strength. So this is why I still want to look at faith at some point. So this book touches on the history, what happens during the formative years of a child, the first 7 years. And there are 2 books actually. So the first book is called it's quite rude. The title of the book is rude. I have to warn you. So, but I think it's a very important book with scientific knowledge, backup, and all sorts of things and stories that might help you understand certain things. Number 1, to heal yourself, to find your self-esteem, rebuild yourself, to understand why others do what they do, or why others have done what they've done, and where you might have gone wrong. How best can you build yourself up having gone through all these experiences? Because like I said, if your self-esteem is low or is not in a good place, the way you see yourself, you can actually be successful in so many places, in so many areas, and still not lead a successful life, so to speak. So the first title is called They Fuck You Up. In this case, he's referring to parents and carers, especially if the parents had no idea that what they were doing whilst they thought they were surviving, was having an effect on their children. He talks about his own experiences in the second book called How Not to FUCK Them Up. And he talks about his mother, that she had depression and she drinks. She had a nice job. I think she was, but she she was distant, and that also had an effect on him. So this person became a doctor, a renowned doctor, but he still had issues as well because of what he went through as a child. So I'd encourage, you, the listener, if reading is your thing, to have a look at those two books, especially if you're dealing with self-esteem issues, if you're dealing with certain aspects of your life where you're not happy about something or someone or a parent, a mother-in-law, a partner, or somebody who's caused all sorts of issues in your life, really issues, and you're trying to understand. Because a lot of these things, what happens is when you deal with certain people, for example, narcissists, and you're not one, it can be very difficult to understand what happened. You can actually end up blaming yourself if you're not careful. You can destroy your self-worth. They can destroy your self-confidence. They can do anything. So it's important that you know a bit about these guys, that this for example, a narcissist, because once you've dealt with one and once you know how narcissists, for example, operate, you'll begin to see a clearer picture in different people. Maybe you dealt with a boyfriend who was a narcissist with narcissistic tendencies. Maybe you had a mother who had narcissistic tendencies. If you're not careful, if you don't address these issues, you might end up being in a relationship with somebody who displays your mother's tendencies as well. Or even if you don't choose them, for example, you have a mother-in-law who has those tendencies. How best do you protect yourself? How do you deal with her? It's possible, and to create boundaries, it's possible to protect yourself only if you have the knowledge and if you know what you're dealing with. So I'd encourage you to get those two books. They're quite hefty reads. Take your time, and I'm sure you'll find something helpful as you go on your own healing journey or self-discovery journey. So why is self-confidence important? Why is it important? I'm sure I've touched a bit on that already. But I believe if you're self-confident, if you're confident, you achieve so much more in life. You discover more, you go places, you lead a more fulfilling life, and you discover who you are, your purpose, rather, you live your life according to who you are, not societal expectations or other people's expectations, which tend to be limited due to so many other reasons. For example, the people who are judging you right now, those people you're afraid of, actually might not even have an idea of who you are because they lack exposure. They don't know. They don't have knowledge. They have perceptions, probably something that they were told growing up. They're far away from you. They've never had access to someone like you. For example, there's so many people who think that Africans, for example, behave a certain way, or Europeans behave a certain way, or Americans, or white people, or Asian people. But when you deal with people on an individual basis, you get to know people, you realize that actually what we think about each other is actually completely wrong. Blacks aren't the same people. We can come from the same family. We can be born by the same mother and father and still be very different people, just like any other race. You can live in the same town or country and have completely different beliefs. So just because somebody's white or black or Asian, it doesn't necessarily mean that people behave a certain way. Like being black, for example. Yes, you can be black, but that has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's obvious that you're black, but so what? Okay, that's a topic for another day. I think it's best we move on. So, but if you're self-confident, you don't spend your life looking at all these things sometimes, which can be very limiting. So self-confidence is really, really important. And I believe that leading a purposeful life is a gift, There's this quotation from Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist, and he talks about the power of people around you and how they can influence you, especially if you don't have confidence. So many of us are leading lives according to other people's perceptions of us, or even our own fears of what other people will do. And people can actually do things. They can bully you, they can say mean things, they can treat you in a certain way. So a lot of people will then hide because they are afraid of such people. But if you have that self-confidence, you're less likely to succumb to these pressures. So I'll read page 15, what Paul Coelho says in The Alchemist about certain people in general. And we'll get to a point that we're trying to make. So he says, just a second. Okay. When someone sees the same people every day, as had happened with him at the seminary, they wind up becoming a part of that person's life. And when they want the person, and then they want the person to change. If someone isn't what others want them to be, the others become angry. Everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should lead their lives, but none about his or her own. So I just thought I'd read this sentence this paragraph really on page 15 in The Alchemist by Paul Coelho, because I have seen such kinds of people in action. If you're not careful, they will bring you down. They will rob you of your self-confidence. And usually they want you to conform to their ways, limited ways of doing things. So you really have to learn to free yourself up, know exactly what you're dealing with. Otherwise, you will lead your life just being a mediocre kind of person because of other people who are probably lost as well. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then I wanted to read something else as well, another paragraph from Brene Brown. She did save my life, my writing journey. If there's one person who gave me the confidence to show up regardless whether people like it or not, it was Brene Brown. Because in the book Daring Greatly, this is what she says. She says, nothing has transformed my life more than realizing that it's a waste of time to evaluate my worthiness by weighing the reaction of the people in the stands. The people who love me and will be there. The people who love me and will be there regardless of the outcome are within arm's reach. So she talks about, those voices of people who usually in the stands, who usually very judgmental. And I always joke that sometimes the best players are those in the stands. Those who are not taking part, people can actually be very judgmental. But if we lead our lives, maybe as creatives, as writers, as people, thinking about such people, you'll never go far in life. And then she also explains why people can be mean to others. And we're actually seeing this in this phenomenon in this day and age. There was a time when there was the mean girl culture. I think it has evolved to what most people would like to call toxic masculinity, and it's actually having an effect on children and that sort of thing. Although my son said something interesting a few days ago. We were talking about the movie Adolescence. I'm yet to see it. I haven't watched it at all. But he did watch it. First day it was released, he actually watched and finished the whole series. Was it a series? I'd like to think that it was a series. Anyway, so he was saying I did ask him a few questions because a few days later, I came across a lot of people writing about the adolescence and, toxic masculinity and that kind of thing. And so that's what I said. I told him that's what I'd read, and I wanted to hear his thoughts about the movie. And he said, obviously there is that toxic masculinity, although it's counterproductive to keep labeling these boys or young children or people as that. He said it doesn't help. It only makes the problem even worse. So he was trying to explain that usually people who behave in a certain way or something like that, it's a cry for help as well. But then if we keep on labeling them and calling them all sorts of things, then it's not helping at all, is it? And I think it's raising a very important point, because the way I see it is that there's a reason why toxic masculinity is taking effect in today's society. There's been a vacuum for a long time. There's so many issues that people have had to deal with. Absent fathers, for example, discipline issues and all. And these things, they left all sorts of chaos, and there is a void. People want to feel as if there's something. People want to belong. Young boys, they want something to believe in. But then values and morals and things like that, it's now a bit difficult to actually show to these children growing up that it's actually a good thing. It pays to be good in life, because a lot of people have tried to be good and they ended up just being hurt. They ended up being ignored. They've worked hard and they've seen people who don't do these things make so much money and things like that in life, and then they end up asking themselves, why should I even try? But there is a problem. Let's say if they're living in a country where there are no jobs, for example, where there's an amazing number of people being unemployed, who do we end up blaming? So what San was saying, I think, makes a lot of sense. So before we judge, we sort of need to address the root causes of what it is that we're actually dealing with. Because if we don't address these things as people, as parents, as educational institutions, as churches, wherever we are, then this problem is going to get out of hand and everybody has to take some kind of responsibility. So I'll read what Brené Brown said about people who we usually fear in life, and those people, they're real. They can actually create damage and havoc in your life. So I'm saying all these things in order to understand why we need that self-confidence and to understand why people act the way they do, because so many of us are carrying a lot of baggage because of what someone else or what they did or didn't do. So she goes on to say, I'm reading page 98 in Daring Greatly. She says, we are hard on others because we are hard on ourselves. That's exactly how judgment works. Finding someone to put down, judge, or criticize becomes a way to get out of the web or call attention away from our box. If you're doing worse than I am at something, I think my chances of surviving are better. So it's like a survival mechanism, just like bullies. If you look at bullies, they do what they do because they're also trying to survive. And she goes on to talk about swimming, for example. Even though you are a strong swimmer and the person you're trying to help is half your size, a desperate person will do anything to save themselves. Let's say if you're trying to rescue somebody who is drowning, that's what she was talking about. So if you're trying to help somebody who's drowning, no matter how good a swimmer you are, the person can actually try to grab a breath, including drowning you in the effort to survive. You see, so many people are also trying to survive, and they will drown others in the process, the gasping for air. So the same is true for women. and the shame web. We're so desperate to get out and stay out of shame that we constantly saving up the people around us as more deserving prey. So I think she was talking about shame, criticism, ridicule, being physically, intolerant of others and that kind of thing. I think when she wrote this, toxic masculinity wasn't a thing. Because we're seeing this amongst certain people. you know, it's not just women, men as well, So why am I talking about these things? Because we've been hurt in life. We've come across so many people who've said and done all sorts of things. And I'm just helping you as I'm trying to help myself as well, get rid of all this baggage so that we can thrive. We can't afford to spend our lives thinking and worrying about people who also trying to survive. That's what I'm trying to say. So this is in a bid to build our self-confidence. So if you lack self-confidence, I remember coming across a few notes on my phone and I wrote something back in 2014. I'd actually observed what son had said and done, and he was quite a confident boy at the time. And what he said, it was quite sort of enlightening. It was like a light bulb moment. So in 2014, this is what I wrote on my phone: confidence attracts positive outcomes. If you have that self-belief and positive energy, good things naturally happen. There will be challenges along the way, that's a fact. But if you truly believe, winning becomes second nature. So this is when you see, let's say, people who have faith or people who are good at something, usually they tend to attract more luck, don't they? People who just have good vibes and things like that. And then people keep on hating them. But it works hand in hand. Negative people tend to attract more stuff. Let's say if you're not confident and you're always talking about how poor you are, how not in shape you are, how all sorts of things. Instead of speaking good things about your life, words have power as well when as far as self-confidence is concerned. So if you keep on saying these things, what you say, it has power. That's your faith. That's your belief. And one thing that I've learned about faith is that what you believe in, if you know the truth, if you have that knowledge, you have to speak it. You speak it with your own mouth. You speak it not once, but over and over again. So you describe yourself who you are. But how can you describe yourself, who you are, and know who you are if you don't know? And I think that's where a lot of people actually, get confused when it comes to faith. So it's important that you speak good things. Don't expect other people to do it for you. Do it for yourself. There's a Bible verse, I don't have it with me, about faith that we believed, therefore we spoke. So speaking is a powerful thing, and you look at people saying, all these motivational words and things like that. And some people say, manifestation and things like that. But when it comes to faith, and I'm talking about Christianity, beliefs, if you speak negative things, even if you don't miss a church service, if you don't see yourself as a child of God, if you don't see yourself as having power, if you don't see yourself as somebody, if you don't know who you are, then you always attract negative things in your life. And I know what it's like to grow up in an environment where so many people think that it's normal to celebrate being poor. They'd never speak anything else. It's always, dwelling around our troubles, our issues, our limitations. That's what people talk about 24/7, which is true. I'm not saying that they don't have the right to speak about these things because they're actually causing problems. But we are stuck in that mantra. We have to turn things around by knowing who we are, and then we can start building up our self-confidence. So self-confidence, it affects every facet of life. And this is why I thought, I'd highlight the fact that confidence or being self-confident attracts more light. And basically, lack of confidence is limited. Lack of self-confidence is very, very limiting. It actually leads us to lead mediocre lives. I have a story to tell you. When I went to do my master's in 2011, I jumped all sorts of hoops to get there, to get to uni and do my master's degree. I didn't have enough money. And I remember on the day of registration, I was waiting in a hall and there were people turning up with money, and some people had already paid their annual school fees. They were already paid for accommodation and things like that. And there I was with nothing but a bit of money for a deposit, an installment plan to negotiate, and a story to tell. That's all I had. I really wanted to do this master's. And lucky enough, they gave me an opportunity. They allowed me to pay that deposit, the money that I'd saved up for at least a year. At the time, it was about £7,000 per year, and for a master's course. And I think that was how many years ago? 2011, quite a while ago. So I started my master's, and I was just happy to be there. But when I did start my master's, I'd been through all sorts of challenges. Things weren't working okay at home. I'd end up the following year, I think I'd go through separation, which led to divorce, really. But it's okay because I'm in good books with my ex-husband, and that his family, and it's quite amazing. And I think one day we'll talk about divorce and how you can make things better for yourself and your children, because it happened to me, but I had to learn. For the longest time, I didn't know what to do. For the longest time, I was angry. For the longest time, I was lost. But now I can say I'm in a good place. Our children are in a good place. My ex-husband is happily married. They have a child. I can talk to my ex-husband about children. We can plan things together, work together. So I'm really, really grateful about that. But at the time, things went okay. 2011, but I'm still trying to rebuild myself. And, so I was going to uni. That was part of the deal, trying to rebuild myself. I'd spent so many years at home. I had a degree, first degree, and I didn't utilize it. I'd spent so much time at home looking after the children. There was no help whatsoever. Ex-husband had to go to work, sometimes work 2 jobs. It wasn't easy. We had the children and so many things that were happening. It was a crazy time, So there I was enrolled, and when I started this course, all I wanted to do was survive, really. And I told myself that if I pass, that would be great. That's all I wanted to do. If I pass, that's enough. So I started, doing assignments, learning things, attending lectures, all sorts of things, tutorials, writing assignments, and everybody around me was so much younger than me. But they were amazing. I met such amazing human beings, and such amazing memories. And it was a very good learning experience that I'll always be grateful for. So I started passing 50%. That was the pass mark. Sometimes I'd get 60%. Usually I was playing around 58, 60%. That's a pass. And I then, so I don't know what it is. Then other day, I went to see my supervisor at his office. There was an issue. I think I'd failed to keep up with the installment plan, and I was really worried that it was going to affect my studies and that kind of thing. So I needed someone to talk to guide me, that kind of thing. So I talked about it. I went to the supervisor. And I'm talking to him. He's just listening to what it is that I'm saying. And then for some reason, he had a file in front of him. And I believe it had all the list of students. I think it was our whole class. For our course, I think there were about 45 students who were studying international management. And these people came from across the world, really, from so many countries. And I was one of them. So it was international management. So he had the file. He was a supervisor for that course. So he opened it and he's reading, he's looking at something. And then he looked at me and then he said, do you know you're capable of getting distinctions? You're more than capable of getting distinctions. And in that time, I was really taken aback. I'm just thinking, say, I have a baggage here. I have stories and issues and situations that I've been through. I've jumped all sorts just to be here. I have 2 children. I have a part-time job. I have these struggles. My marriage is falling apart and I have issues. I've cried loads and I still have to do assignments and things. I don't even know where I'm coming from. I don't even know where I'm going. How can you tell me that I'm capable of achieving distinctions? And to be fair, in that moment, I was actually more than happy that I was passing, that I wasn't failing in assignments. And yeah, and this is like what they call a red brick or Russell Group university. So the standards were quite high and they were very demanding. And I was more than happy to pass. Anyway, so he said these things, and I'm so grateful that I saw something about the way he expressed and said these things. And I thought, you know what? I think he's seen something in me. And that something has always been there. Even as a child, that something has always been there. But sometimes it would go, we've talked about confidence. You lose it. Sometimes it comes back, you build it up. But as a child, I was very confident. But I've lost confidence, not once, not twice, so many times. Usually when you face difficult situations, that's when a lot of people lose their self-confidence as well. So I started, doing things differently. I started listening to whatever it is the lecturers were telling us. How do you get a distinction? What do you need to do in order to get a distinction? I started taking notes. I started, just paying more attention to what it is that I was doing. And guess what? By the end of the second semester, I was getting distinctions across the board, except maybe for one subject, one module. But everywhere else, it was distinction. And I even did the dissertation. I got a distinction. And overall, I got a merit because I had a few passes in the first semester. So the power of believing in yourself, I'm lucky that I did manage to believe in myself, and it turned around things for me. I stopped passing and started excelling. So that's why self-confidence is very, very important in our lives. And I also remember, speaking of self-confidence and losing it, I remember when I changed schools, I think it was grade 2, second grade, I changed schools and went to a new school. We moved completely uprooted to a completely different place. We used to live there, went to another place and then went back again. So that meant a new place. I'm coming from a smaller environment and now I'm in a larger environment. There's so many children around. And I remember sitting a maths test in the classroom at some point with everybody else. Everyone were doing the same work. But I'd stopped believing in myself because I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in this place. I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone to talk to me. Or so all sorts of things. I was so worried. I became so very timid and I started doubting myself. And I remember these 2 girls, discussing answers. It was a test. We're not supposed to to talk or anything like that. We're supposed to be, it was individual work, timed, I think. And these 2 girls, they discussing answers, showing each other answers. And I thought, wow, they look like they know what they're doing. And I really wanted to copy them. And then by then, my self-confidence has hit rock bottom because I'm in a new environment. And the teacher noticed that and she moved me in a different place. So I sat in a corner. And when I was, removed from where these 2 girls were, I started focusing, concentrating on my work and doing my thing. And mind you, I wasn't a struggler at school. But in that moment, because of lack of confidence, I was finding everything difficult. And I'd later learn that these 2 girls were actually strugglers. They'd always be, last. They used to do this positioning system where they'd have number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, up to number 45 in the class. They tally everything, all the subjects, the marks, they add them up, and whoever had the highest marks was number 1, followed by number 2, until number 45. So imagine, so these two girls were amongst those children who always got the lowest marks. But because of me not having confidence, at some point I was more than happy to copy them. And this is what we do in life. When you lose our confidence, we start not focusing on our own abilities, our capabilities, and all those other things that we could utilize to make ourselves better. We start paying attention on other people. We live according to fear. We lose sight of who we are. We lose sight of what we're capable of doing. We become lost, really. So this is why self-confidence is very important. I've also written a few notes here, like how do we lose confidence? I've talked about, sometimes it's, something that happens during our formative years. I've also touched on the people we meet, the environments we grow up in. It could be something bad happening to you, an illness or an accident or health issues, for example. They can all have an effect on our confidence. It could be environmental issues. Let's say you move, like I've just said, you move from one place to another as a child, or from one country you migrate to another country. Now you have to learn new ways of doing things, the norms and things like that, and to find yourself, feeling lost. That can have an effect on your confidence. And other people's experiences. We've touched on narcissists, for example, and bullies, and how they can affect, our self-confidence. I wrote my first book in 2021 called Hilltop. And in the story, it's actually inspired by my children's stories, actually. There's a time when they had to change schools and, they moved. And I did see that transition from a child being a very confident boy to somebody who became angry, passive aggressive, and, avoidance, unwillingness to learn and things like that. So confidence is another topic that I really, touch on in Hilltop. It's aimed for children from 9 years old to 18, but it's also inspiring to adults. A few adults have found the book quite inspirational. So if you don't mind looking at my book, it's an ebook available on Amazon.com. It's available on Barnes & Noble. It's an ebook, and 1 or 2 other platforms. It's also available at Waterstones. And I think there's a sale going on right now. So if you don't mind, look for Hilltop by Fortune Mawone. I will be analyzing Hilltop in the next few weeks. So I think just be aware of that, and we'll talk on confidence again in depth. And the reason why people lose their confidence sometimes is due to lack of knowledge. For example, if we live in certain places where our parents or the people we're growing up with, they have no idea really about how what they do affect children, then it's bound to affect us. So I did put lack of knowledge, and this is why I did go deeper on books and what's been written about this issue, so that I can keep on learning. Because if we don't know, how can we start to correct or rectify things? So we can start doing things or changing things bit by bit, isn't it? One other topic as well that my friends and I have discussed a bit is the comparison, social media. The difference between reality and perceptions. Those things they're actually contributing to a loss of confidence to so many people. And I think it's even worse if somebody's got low self-esteem. So for the longest time, when social media was introduced, we were coming across images, videos of people living their lives, people pretending that everything is okay. I'm not saying that everybody who posts is lying, but there's a lot of lies that happen on social media. And a lot of people are judging themselves based on false things that they see online. Somebody can actually get in debt. I was reading an article not too long ago of mothers who really felt the need to buy new toys, certain toys for their children, because there were mothers who were showing off these kinds of things on social media. We've seen it with girls buying makeup and all sorts of products because there's so much pressure to do so. They're influencers and all sorts of things. I went through a natural hair, what's called a natural hair journey many years ago. And at first it was okay to learn about natural hair, but over time it became all about products, all sorts of things. And I fell for that. And I started buying products left, right, center, just buying products because I thought the products would do magical things to my hair. And it took me a while to realize that they wouldn't. They weren't. And most of these products are more or less the same. You buy the same conditioner, you react to it. Like I developed scalp dermatitis or something like that because I was reacting to certain products that they put in shampoos or conditioners. Some of them, not all of them. But because I was expecting, I had this picture of how my hair should look like, I would be buying products all the time, thinking that they were the answer to the problems that I was facing, but they were not. And over time, I've learned a lot about, managing my health. I've learned about, techniques and things like that. So social media is something that we really need to be aware of as people, as you listen to this. That's one area. And we also need to remember, as we do all these things, we also need to remember that we're not living our lives, to compete with anybody. We just have to lead fulfilling lives because we're all so different in our areas, in so many areas. So I'm just going to wrap up things because I think I've been talking for quite a while. There's a story that I wanted to share. And it says I've written internal voices, and I did highlight it. So I'll mention that story before we move on towards conclusion. But internal voices. I was listening to a tutorial the other day. It was about Final Cut Pro. And somebody was talking about voice, and we know so many people, they don't like the sound of their voices, myself included, so many people. And this person, he was saying in all the time that he has shared content on YouTube and other platforms, not one person has ever said anything bad about the way he speaks. And this person, I think, is American, white. And he was saying nobody has ever mentioned anything about the way he speaks, but he used to tell himself that his voice was horrible. And he believed that. And it took him a while to realize that the voice, that internal voice, the loudest voice that was speaking negative things about him, it wasn't other people's, but his. And we do fall prey to that, don't we? When we start speaking bad things about ourselves. Remember self-esteem. I've seen adults who could be doing amazing things limit themselves in life because they keep telling themselves that they're not worthy, that other people are better than them. And once you believe that, then you're in trouble, really. How can we rebuild or restore self-confidence? How can we build it up? How can we restore? I'll look at ourselves as adults briefly and then as children as well to help our children with confidence. But it's not everything because there's so much stuff to cover, but we're running out of time. I remember, I think it was around 2014, having a conversation with an old classmate she'd been my classmate between 1991 and 1994. And then we went to separate schools for A-levels. And then we went to different universities, colleges. I went to uni. I think she went to college, that sort of thing. So we lost touch until 2014. By then, I was married. I'd been married actually, and I was going through divorce. So naturally, my confidence levels were pretty low. And we could talk because she was living in a European country. They'd moved to a European country. She had a child. She was married and things like that. And this is what she said to me. So she was listening to my stories and things were not adding up because as far as she knew or as far as she believed, I should have been going places. But here I was with a lot of sob stories. And she was listening and she was like, the other time I was telling, I've always wondered how you did in life because I used to tell my husband that there's this girl I went to school with. Her name is Fortune. And I think she's done amazing things in life. I think she's married. There was once a rumor saying that Fortune was married to an ambassador. And then being an ambassador meant something huge. We're talking 90s. So there was a rumor, and I wasn't even married to an ambassador, but that was the rumor. And then she was telling her husband who didn't know me at the time, and she was saying, I told him that I believe it. I believe she's married to an ambassador, and I believe she's doing something amazing because we went to school together, and I used to borrow a geography notebook sometimes. I've always taken good notes. I think that's one of my strengths. So my friend acknowledged that. She was like, I used to borrow your geography notes because sometimes, I'd go through your notes to see what it is that I'd missed and that sort of thing. And she'd, beef up her own notes. So as she was going through my notes, and she said it happened almost all the time. One thing that stood out was the fact that inside the geography notebook, there were good notes, use good geography notes, drawings, explanations, all sorts, but she'd come across motivational quotes all over pages, page and page. I'd be writing something just like what I've always done, even in my adult years. I'd be thinking about something and then I'd write it down. So if I'm going through challenges, whatever challenges I'm going through at that time, I'm still doing my GCSE equivalent. It was O levels at the time. So I'm going through stuff here and there. I think I must have been around 13, 14. I can't remember. 15, I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe, around 14 or something like that. But I think it went on for about 4 years. So I just write things and I talk about my dreams, my visions. No matter what it is that I was going through, I'd always tell myself that it was going to be okay. I was always that positive person, which explains why I'd still show up on Facebook, for example, and write all sorts of motivational, inspirational stuff, even without likes. I still had a few friends who supported me, and I'm so grateful. But usually I just show up and express myself. And that's me. But I'd forgotten about all of that. I'd forgotten about how positive, my outlook had been. Lucky enough, I was raised in a happy household. It wasn't perfect, but I was raised by, a mother and a father who really, truly loved me and my brothers, and sisters. So we grew up on love. We were reared on love. It wasn't perfect, but that's the truth. And I think it really helped us navigate this life somehow. So she had this kind of sob stories and everything. And I remember she said these words in Shona. She was like, the thing is, okay, that's where you are right now. Things aren't okay and whatnot. But the thing is, and she said these 2 words in Shona. I'll translate what they mean. She said, Ziva Zvauri. And it means know who you are. It doesn't matter what you've gone through. Yes, you've faced some challenges, but know who you are. And that said a lot of things. It said a lot in that moment to remember who I was. And sometimes a lot of us, they really need to get to a point where the only way to start rebuilding their self-confidence is to remember who they were growing up. I have always said that not many people need motivation to do this, to do that. Most people that I've come across, most people that I know, adults especially, they just need to be reminded of who they are, because a lot of us lost ourselves in the name of living. Careers, all sorts of things. We've gone through so much and we've lost touch with who we really are. We went into survival modes, we faced challenges along the way, and we've forgotten. So if you're listening to this, maybe you've raised kids at some point, and for the longest time it was all about children. You forgot about yourself. Maybe you are a father who works hard to provide for his family, and you never have time to pursue your own interests. I might encourage you to start thinking about those things. How best can you rebuild your self-confidence? Because it's important that you are happy, you are confident, even as a father, and it's never too late to rebuild yourself. Even you are a mother, if you stayed at home, you raised children, you forgot about your career for a while, and now you don't even know what to do with yourself, especially when the children fly the nest and you don't know what to do with yourself. And you start leading a life of mediocrity. No, it's not too late. So know who you are. Remember who you were growing up. A lot of us are lucky enough to have gone through times when life was so good. We have so many memories. Remember the music you used to listen to, the movies you used to watch, all those things. We thought that life was amazing because of what we were experiencing growing up. I know there are other people who don't have these amazing stories to tell, but if you do, remember who you are. And also be mindful of what you consume, what you watch, what you eat, what you read. And I'd encourage you to start thinking about, building up meaningful relationships, because they really can help the people who speak things into your life. I'm lucky to have a few friends who actually believe in me, and they've always encouraged me, even when I'm doubting myself. And those people, had it not been for those people who've been upholding me for years, I really don't know where I'd be. And those people, they've helped me build up my confidence. Even a few friends have said, you know what, you raise important points when you speak, even in our messages back and forth. I think you should start a podcast. Had it not been for those guys, I probably wouldn't even be attempting to speak to you right now. So be mindful of who you surround yourself with. And just what the teacher was saying, my daughter's teacher at the time, she said, confidence is fragile. And she was referring to to my daughter going into a bigger school, knowing that if she's not careful, if she ends up in the wrong company, things were not going to be okay for her. And she knew that in that big school, there were a few characters, probably even bullies. And if daughter wasn't prepared, if she wasn't surrounded by amazing relationships, she wasn't going to, to cope in that environment. Not that it was a bad school. It was still an amazing school. But that's where we are. And I also did talk about, I did write these notes. I'm talking about having faith and speak good things over your life. I think I did touch on that. And remember that, whatever goal you have when it comes to you working on your self-confidence, start small. Start with your passions, things that you've stopped doing maybe, for example. Start small, and over time, you can build up your confidence. I know of a girl who used to do her makeup almost every day. And it got to a point where she'd take pictures of herself. And I was just watching her. At first, it was just average. But over the years, she became so good that she became, really successful in life thanks to makeup alone. It could be baking, it could be cooking, it could be whatever sports, it could be doing your hair, it could be playing a musical, instrument, or singing, or whatever that you really enjoy doing. Do that, and know that the more you achieve, you have those small wins in life, you're winning here and there, it actually encourages you to keep going and trying, so I did write that one achievement begets another. The more you achieve small things, they build up, they join up. It's, it happens over time. It just happens over time. So when you do one thing, you get, let's say you're trying to lose weight, you're more likely to start eating well, and it's going to boost your confidence as well. The way you dress and everything, where you go and things like that. So one small achievement is actually good for you. So start small with small things in life, and you'll notice that over time, good things just start happening to you. It takes time, but I promise you, it works. It's happened to me. I speak from experience. And focus on one thing at a time, and otherwise you'd feel overwhelmed. A few days ago, I was talking to my son. He was sitting a mock exam, and he'd been revising for that paper. Well, he had 3 exams, and he'd been revising for one of them. No, what he'd managed, he'd said, okay, there were 3. He'd done one, paper 1. There were 2 more to go, and he was still revising for the remaining 2 papers. And this is what he said. He said he didn't think that he could remember anything about biology, as he was focusing on one other subject, which was he was due to sit the following day, and then biology was on a Friday. But then he started panicking that he couldn't remember anything about biology. And I remember telling him that your brain is so capable of retaining information. You might think that you know nothing, or you feel like you know nothing, but when you get into that exam situation, you will notice that things will just, the answers and everything that you seek right now, it will just start overflowing during the exam, because you've prepared for so long. Trust your brain, that your brain is like a powerful computer, capable of sorting out information, storing information, and retrieving that information when it really matters. So he stopped panicking. I'd like to think so. So he set one paper the following day, and then on the Friday, he set the biology paper. And guess what he got as a result of his hard work? Even though he was doubting himself at some point, he got an A star. But this is a child who was doubting himself prior to the exam because of, so focus on one, because he was feeling overwhelmed really. The other subjects, I think it all started when he started thinking that, oh my gosh, I don't think I know enough stuff in chemistry, for example. And he was really worried about chemistry, and he thought he knew nothing. There was so much pressure. And then it had a knock-on effect on his biology as well, which he was here to sit. So always focusing on one thing at a time will help us build our confidence and do what matters. Those things that make you tick, to start rebuilding your confidence. I've already mentioned that. Leave room for failure. If you can do this for yourself and for your children as well, we were never meant to be perfect, none of us. Just leave room for failure. And remember the 80-20 rule, the Pareto law, that if you do the right thing, 80% of the time, for example, it's still okay rather than aiming for that 100%. I know that's not exactly what it says, but just try to do 80-20, not 100, because sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with trying to do too much. I'm prone to that. I really am prone to that. And learn to create boundaries in life, because if you don't have boundaries, people walk all over you. Learn to say no. And my friend has sent me a few articles before about creating boundaries and why we keep on attracting certain people in life and things like that in different, it's because sometimes we lack those boundaries. So it's okay to say no in life. That will help you build up confidence. Some people think that by saying yes to everything, then they'll become more successful. Then they'll become, more, I don't know, maybe better things will happen to them. But unfortunately, it works the other way. So many people say yes, even in work situations. People who say yes to everything, they usually become taken for granted. They don't get promotions and things like that. We'll touch on that maybe in another topic, another day. There's a book that I'd want to recommend. It's called Essentialism by something Markion or something, just look it up, you'll find it. So it touches on the importance of saying no. You don't have to say yes to everything because we're never created to operate like that, And when it comes to children, it's very important that we as parents and as caregivers, we also boost up our confidence, our self-confidence reserves. Because if we lack in confidence, how can we inspire our own children to be confident? And like I said before, just for us to be kind, give them grace. Don't expect perfection from them. And allow room for failure. I used to remember when I used to cook with my children when they were young, they'd create a mess in the kitchen. And imagine if I had focused on a clean kitchen, they wouldn't have learned anything. They wouldn't have learned to cook for themselves. And my daughter, especially, she's an amazing cook. She cooks for herself. She's at uni. She is incredible. But she started young. She started experimenting and she gained the confidence. And because she can cook, even when she goes through challenging times at uni, it's not as bad because she can still spruce up something really nice on the cheap. So self-confidence is a good thing, but it's something that we need to build over time and allow our children to build as well. But we have to give them, we have to be patient with them. We have to give them the grace. And when they do something good, vocalize it. It's easier to criticize, and we live in days where so many people are more than happy to criticize. We talked on what Brené Brown said about the people in the stands and all sorts. And if you lead your life thinking about, okay, my feeling of, me feeling worthy is determined by whether people like me or not, then you become stuck. I remember she talks about that in her book as well. Don't be at the mercy of what people think about you. That's what I'm trying to say. And you can also give that same grace to your children. When they do a good job, vocalize it, praise them. It won't get to their heads. They really need it because usually all they hear is negative criticism. And they're busy comparing themselves with others online. Who knows what else they're consuming? That's a big issue right now in this day and age. And make sure you create opportunities. I know as parents, sometimes we become so overwhelmed. We have to go to work. We have these other responsibilities. If you don't create opportunities for these children, to play, to recognize the gifts and talents and nurture those gifts and talents, then we're not doing anything helpful to them. We might have loads of money, and this is an issue I'd love to discuss in future, especially the diaspora parents, people who are raising children in developed world when they grew up in the developing countries. That's a big issue because sometimes we think that, okay, if you have money, that's enough. If you're buying your child toys and gifts and new shoes and clothes, then it's enough. Unfortunately, it's not. You really have to make time. You really have to be present. You really have to be there for your children. And this, again, I speak from experience. And the last point that I'd like to raise concerning children and helping them to build or rebuild their confidence is encourage them to try new things. I'll never even if when you haven't tried it yourself, because a lot of us, and this I'm going to diaspora parents, we didn't experience what our children are experiencing in this day and age. We didn't have much material things, and our children, they have access to quite a lot of things. And sometimes we have to we have to adapt. So even if we have fears, I'm not talking about things like social media. We still need boundaries for our children, and we don't even have to say yes to everything. We still need these children. They still need protection. They still need boundaries. But I've seen adults who say no, who lead their lives, from that place of fear because they've never tried. They've never been exposed to it growing up. And I remember when I used to work with my friends, sometime last year, we were at a food festival and we're selling Japanese sweets and snacks. And we were offering samples for people to test before they could make a purchase. And a lot of people were responding very well. A lot of people were buying these products after sampling these products. But there was this parent, quite a few parents who came to the stall with their young children, and the children would be like, I don't want to eat, I don't want to try it. You know how children, how picky they can be. And I remember this mom, just encouraging her child to try new things. She was like, it's okay to try new things, give it a try. And the son tasted something, I can't remember what it was, maybe 1 or 2 items. And he pretty much enjoyed it. He really loved it. And the mom knew that if only he could taste it, he'd realize that this is actually amazing. So sometimes our fears, they cripple us because we don't know any better. But if you're willing to try new things, it might help us as well in helping us, discover hidden things about ourselves, build or rebuild our confidence, discover things that we didn't even know about ourselves, because so many times we limit ourselves because of fear of judgment, fear of ridicule, fear of disappointment. And these things are real. We've been disappointed before. We've trusted things that ended up disappointing us. We've trusted products, for example, that ended up not serving us well. We've trusted people who ended up not being who they said they were. So I understand why we lead fearful lives, and we can never be perfect. So this is me coming to the final journey of Our Confidence is Fragile podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you've listened to this until now, then you are amazing. It's like more than one and a half hours that we have. We've spoken for 1.5 hours. We've been together for 1.5 hours or more. I don't know what it is you've been doing, whether you've been doing other things or whether you've taken, you stopped at some point and, and then, continued at some point. That's still okay. So thank you very much. And if something is speaking to you right now, if you have something to encourage others, please, especially if you're on YouTube, it will be lovely for you to leave a comment so that others can learn, especially if you know a thing or two about confidence, self-esteem, those kinds of things. If you could leave a comment so that other people can also learn as we try to rebuild ourselves, discover ourselves, nurture our children, and each and every person is showing up with light and switching on their own light in the best way they can with who they are. I'm doing my part. There's so many amazing people out there who are also doing their part, and I'm showing up here today thanks to the contributions of other people. Some people we've never met and some people will never meet in life. But I've learned so much from them. I've been encouraged, I've been inspired, and I hope that I'm also doing the same for you. And as you go into the world, you become a blessing to others, because you and I were created to be, we're blessed to be blessings to others. So I hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you. Goodbye. Take care.